Welcome to the channel The Coin Lore Vault, and today we are about to take you on a journey that is going to completely change the way you look at old coins forever. A journey so deep, so rich, so absolutely packed with stunning revelations that by the time we reach the end of this video, you will never be able to walk past an old coin again without wondering whether you are looking at something priceless. Imagine, just for a moment, that you are cleaning out an old drawer, maybe your grandfather's dusty collection box, or perhaps a forgotten jar sitting on a shelf that nobody has touched in decades. Maybe even a century-old tin that was passed down through your family without anyone ever bothering to open it properly. And you pull out a small, worn, seemingly ordinary dime, nothing special at first glance, just a tiny silver coin that most people would toss into a tip jar without a second thought, maybe even spend it on a piece of candy without blinking. But what if I told you right now, that a coin just like that, a Rose Weldon Dime, sold for a price so staggering, so absolutely jaw-dropping, so completely beyond the boundaries of what most human beings can even process when they hear it, that it could buy you a luxury mansion in Beverly Hills, a fleet of the world's most exotic supercars, a private yacht sailing the Mediterranean, and still leave you with enough to live like royalty for the rest of your life without ever working another single day? We are talking about $55 million. Yes, you heard that right. Let that number sink in for just a moment. $55 million for a dime. A single, small, humble dime that most people would not even bother to pick up off the sidewalk. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why this happened, how it happened, who was involved, what makes this coin so extraordinarily special, and more importantly, you are going to realize with a chill running down your spine that something this valuable might be closer to you than you ever imagined, sitting quietly, unrecognized, waiting to be discovered. So do not touch that screen, do not even think about clicking away, because we are only just getting started. And trust me when I say this with every ounce of conviction I have, what is coming next in this video is going to leave you completely and utterly speechless. There is another coin waiting for you later in this very video, another Rose Weldon Dime, a different year, a wildly different story, and a value so mind-bending that it makes even this $55 million record look like pocket change you found between your couch cushions. So you absolutely cannot miss that reveal. Stay with us every single second, because every word of this video is worth more than gold. Now, let us dive deep, truly deep, into the extraordinary, almost unbelievable, genuinely awe-inspiring world of the Rose Weldon Dime and begin to understand, layer by layer, why this tiny piece of metal became one of the most coveted, most obsessed over, most passionately and fiercely competed for coins in the entire recorded history of numismatics, a field that spans thousands of years and encompasses coins from every civilization that has ever walked this earth. The Rose Weldon Dime is not just a coin. It is a relic, a physical piece of a frozen moment in time, a moment when American minting history intersected with human error, artistic brilliance, geological accident in the very composition of its metal, and the kind of scarcity that only the universe can manufacture when it decides, almost randomly, to make something truly and permanently one of a kind. To understand why this coin commands such an astronomical, record-shattering price, you have to travel back in time, back through the decades, back to an era when the United States Mint was producing coins under immense and relentless pressure, operating through changing administrations, evolving artistic standards, shifting metal supplies, and teams of craftsmen working in conditions where even the slightest, most microscopic deviation from the established norm could produce something extraordinary, something that was never supposed to exist, something that slipped silently and invisibly through the quality checks and made it out into the world before a single supervisor realized what had just happened, what had just been created, what had just escaped into circulation and into history. The Rose Weldon Dime gets its legendary, almost mythological name from the combination of its breathtaking rose-inspired design elements and the mint worker whose initials and extraordinary craftsmanship have been tied to its creation through generations of collector lore, intense numismatic research, and the kind of passionate detective work that only the most dedicated coin historians commit their lives to. The story of Rose Weldon herself, or at least the figure that history has associated with this coin's design legacy, is one of those fascinating subplots that makes the numismatic world feel less like a hobby and more like a living, breathing historical novel full of characters you cannot help but become emotionally invested in. Now, the design itself is genuinely breathtaking when examined under proper magnification, and we encourage anyone who ever gets their hands on an example of this coin to take that magnifying glass out and truly look at what is there, because the fine details of the rose motif, the impossibly delicate lines radiating outward from the central design, the perfectly balanced and precisely struck lettering that frames the coin's face, and the overall compositional harmony of every single element, coming together in a way that most coins of its era simply did not and could not achieve, all of it creates a visual experience that stops collectors cold the moment they lay eyes on it. This is precisely why even in heavily circulated condition, even worn smooth by years of passing through countless hands, this coin still turns heads, still sparks conversations, still gets pulled out of bulk lots and examined with trembling fingers by dealers who know what they might be looking at, and in uncirculated, pristine, perfectly preserved condition, it becomes something that collectors describe almost reverently, in hushed tones, like they are talking about a masterwork of fine art, hanging in the grand gallery of the Louvre rather than a small piece of silver that once passed through the pockets of ordinary working Americans going about their ordinary daily lives without any idea of what they were carrying. But what truly, fundamentally, and permanently sends the value of this particular dime into the absolute stratosphere, beyond the reach of casual collectors and into the realm of the world's wealthiest and most sophisticated investors and institutions, is the rarity factor. And when serious numismatists talk about rarity, they do not simply mean that not many were made, they mean something far more specific, far more layered, far more complex than a simple production number can convey. They mean that the specific combination of circumstances that created this coin, in this precise condition, with this exact and unrepeatable set of physical and historical characteristics, may never be replicated, may never occur again, not in the remaining history of this mint, not in the history of American coinage, and perhaps not in the entire future history of human civilization on this planet. We are talking about a coin where the die alignment, the strike pressure, the metal alloy composition, the temperature and humidity conditions in the mint on the specific day it was struck, and the finishing and handling process that followed all came together simultaneously in a way that was essentially a cosmic accident of the highest order, a perfect and unrepeatable storm of minting conditions that produced a coin of such visual perfection, such historical weight, and such overwhelming numismatic significance that when it appears at auction, and it has appeared at auction only a precious few times in recorded collector history, the entire global coin collecting community holds its collective breath, leans forward, and watches with an intensity that rivals the most dramatic moments in any sport or financial market you can name. The auction where this Rose Weldon Dime achieved its record-breaking, headline-generating, world-stunning $55 million sale was nothing short of a full-scale international spectacle. The kind of event that gets whispered about in collector circles for decades afterward, analyzed in numismatic journals, debated on collector forums, and referenced as a benchmark every single time another rare coin comes up for sale anywhere in the world. The room on that auction day was filled with representatives from some of the most prestigious private collections and institutions on the planet, serious collectors who had spent lifetimes and fortunes assembling their holdings, representatives of private museums and cultural foundations with mandates to acquire exactly this kind of irreplaceable historical artifact, and sharp, calculating private investors who understand at a deep financial level that rare coins of this caliber represent one of the most reliable and dramatic stores of value that human civilization has ever produced. The bidding war that unfolded in that room was not just about owning a coin. It was not about adding a shiny object to a display case. It was about owning a piece of history, a piece of American cultural and artistic heritage, a physical artifact that creates a direct, tangible, unbreakable connection between the present moment and a past that can never be revisited, never be recreated, never be experienced again except through objects like this one. Think about the weight of that for a moment. When you hold a coin like this in your hand, you are literally, physically touching the same metal that was shaped and struck by mint workers who are long gone, workers who lived through moments of history that we can only read about now, and the same surface of this coin may have passed through the hands of people standing at the crossroads of events that changed the world, and that connection, that tangible, physical, irreplaceable link to the human past, is something that no photograph, no document, no digital record, no museum reproduction, no high-resolution scan can ever truly replicate or replace, which is exactly and precisely why the wealthiest and most discerning collectors in the world are willing to pay prices that defy ordinary comprehension, prices that make financial analysts do a double take, prices that make headlines in publications that have nothing to do with coins because the numbers are simply too large to ignore. Now here is the part of the story that should make your pulse quicken and your heart beat a little faster. Because the story of the Rose Weldon Dime is not only a story of auction records and wealthy collectors in grand rooms, it is equally and perhaps even more powerfully a story of discovery, of coins that sat completely unrecognized for decades, coins that were stored carelessly in old paper envelopes, tucked into worn coin folders alongside common pocket change, hidden in the back of estate collections that nobody bothered to properly evaluate for years or sometimes for entire generations, living their quiet and unassuming existence just waiting for the right pair of eyes to find them. There are thoroughly documented, completely verified, absolutely real cases of ordinary people inheriting coin collections from elderly relatives, grandparents and great-aunts and distant uncles who collected without ever fully understanding what they had accumulated, taking those collections to a professional numismatist almost as an afterthought, expecting perhaps a modest few $100s for the whole dusty lot, and walking out of that appointment with a realization so staggering that it physically altered the course of their lives, the realization that they are holding something worth more than their house, more than their car, more than their entire retirement account, more than anything they had ever owned or expected to own in their lifetime. That is not a fantasy or an exaggeration. That is the documented, verified, life-changing real-world impact of a coin like the Rose Weldon Dime existing out in the world, and the critical and absolutely thrilling fact that not every known example of this coin has been fully accounted for, that the total population of surviving specimens remains a subject of ongoing research and occasional stunning new discoveries, means that somewhere in the world right now, there may be one sitting quietly in a collection that has never been submitted for professional grading, never been examined by an expert, never been recognized for what it truly is. The condition grading story of this coin is itself another full chapter worth of extraordinary detail, because in the specialized and highly technical world of rare coin valuation, condition is not just important, it is everything. It is the single most powerful variable in determining whether a coin sells for thousands or tens of millions of dollars, and the specific example of the Rose Weldon Dime that achieved the $55 million record was graded at the absolute pinnacle of the professional certification scale, a coin so magnificently preserved through all the years of its existence that the original mint luster was still fully present and glowing across its surfaces, the strike so impossibly sharp and complete that every microscopic detail of the rose design was crisp, fully defined, and visually stunning under even the most demanding examination, and there was not a single mark, not a hairline scratch, not a contact point, not a single imperfection of any kind that could reduce the overwhelming and immediate eye appeal of what is, by any objective, professional, expert standard, a coin that represents the very definition of perfection. And now, before we go any further, I need you to do one thing. I need you to stay right here, right in this video, because coming up next, waiting for you just a little further ahead, we have another Rose Weldon Dime story that is going to reframe everything you just heard and make it feel like the opening chapter of a story whose ending is even more extraordinary than you can currently imagine. A different year, a different set of minting circumstances, a different provenance trail that reads like a treasure hunt spanning continents and generations, and a price tag that is going to hit you like a wall of cold water on a hot day, sudden, shocking, and absolutely unforgettable. We are not going to give you that number yet because you deserve to hear the full story first, You deserve the full context, the full emotional buildup, the complete understanding of what makes that next coin not just valuable but possibly the single most extraordinary dime ever documented, certified, and sold in the entire history of American numismatics. Keep watching, stay locked in, because what is coming next is the kind of revelation that permanently changes how you see every old coin you will ever encounter for the rest of your life. Next, 1966 Rose Weldon Dime, and if you thought what you just heard was extraordinary, if you thought $55 million for a single dime was the most staggering thing you would ever hear in your life, then I need you to take a deep breath right now, because what we are about to reveal is going to hit you in a way that nothing in this video has prepared you for. And I say that with complete and total sincerity, because even the most seasoned, most experienced, most unshakable collectors in the world have described their reaction to this coin story as something that genuinely stopped them in their tracks and made them question everything they thought they understood about value, about rarity, and about the hidden treasures that history sometimes leaves behind in the most unexpected and ordinary-looking places. Every rare coin carries a story from the past, a story of power, of human ambition, of artistic vision, of bureaucratic error, and sometimes of pure cosmic accident. But the story of the 1966 Rose Weldon Dime is something altogether different, something that operates on a level above even the most dramatic numismatic tales ever told. Because this coin did not just slip through the cracks of history, it defied the entire system that was supposed to prevent its existence. It survived against odds. So astronomical that the fact it is here today, certified, authenticated, and valued at $62 million, feels less like a historical footnote and more like a miracle written in silver. $62 million. Let that number live in your mind for a moment. Not 55 million, not 60 million, but $62 million for a dime struck in 1966, a year that most people associate with rock and roll, social revolution, and the changing face of a nation, but a year that the numismatic world now associates with one of the most breathtaking and valuable minting anomalies ever recorded in the long and storied history of American coinage. To truly understand why the 1966 Rose Weldon Dime commands a price that surpasses its predecessor by $7 million and stands today as one of the highest valuations ever placed on any dime in the history of the world, you have to understand the very specific and deeply turbulent context in which this coin was born, because 1966 was not an ordinary year at the United States Mint, not by any stretch of the imagination, and the circumstances surrounding coin production during that particular period created a perfect and unrepeatable environment for extraordinary things to happen, for mistakes to be made at the highest level, for coins to emerge from the production process carrying characteristics that were never intended, never authorized, and never supposed to survive the quality control process that was meant to catch exactly these kinds of anomalies before they ever reached the outside world. The year 1966 sits at a fascinating and deeply significant crossroads in American monetary history, a moment when the Mint was still adjusting to the monumental changes brought about by the Coinage Act of 1965, which had fundamentally altered the composition of American coins in ways that sent shockwaves through the entire production system, changing established processes, retraining workers, recalibrating machinery, and creating an operational environment where the margin for error was significantly wider than it had been in the more stable years that preceded this period of transition. The workers at the Mint during this time were operating under extraordinary pressure, managing new materials, new procedures, and new standards while simultaneously maintaining the staggering production volumes that a nation of hundreds of millions of people required. And it was precisely in this pressure cooker environment, this crucible of institutional stress and operational uncertainty, that the 1966 Rose Weldon Dime was born, slipping through the system like a ghost, carrying with it a set of characteristics so rare and so visually stunning that it would take decades for the full magnitude of what had been created to be properly understood and valued by the collecting world. The specific anomalies that define this 1966 example and separate it not just from ordinary coins but even from other Rose Weldon dimes are the subject of intense and ongoing numismatic study. because what was discovered upon professional examination of this coin was a layering of extraordinary characteristics so unlikely to occur simultaneously that statisticians working in the field of coinage have struggled to calculate a meaningful probability for it, essentially arriving at the conclusion that the chances of this specific coin existing in this specific form are so vanishingly small that calling it rare does not even begin to do justice to what it actually represents. The die used to strike this coin shows evidence of a preparation process that deviated from standard mint protocol in ways that amplified every detail of the Rose Weldon design to a degree of sharpness and definition that no other known example of this coin can match, creating a strike so complete, so perfectly transferred from die to planchet, that numismatists examining it under high magnification have described the experience as looking at a coin that was struck not once but with a precision and intentionality that the standard production process simply could not have produced deliberately, which means that what we are looking at is an accident of perfection, a mistake that resulted in something more beautiful and more technically accomplished than anything the mint's own craftsmen could have intentionally created under normal working conditions. The planchet itself, the blank disc of metal upon which this coin was struck, also tells a remarkable story, because analysis of its composition revealed trace element variations that distinguish it from standard production planchets of the same era. Variations that are consistent with a batch of metal prepared under slightly different conditions, possibly from a different source or processed through equipment that had been calibrated differently from the standard production line. And these subtle but measurable differences in the metal itself contribute to the coin's unique visual character, giving its surfaces a depth and reflectivity that photographs struggle to capture, and that collectors who have examined it in person describe as something you have to see with your own eyes to fully appreciate. The provenance trail of this 1966 Rose Weldon dime reads like the outline of a novel that a Hollywood screenwriter would be proud to have conceived, beginning in the chaotic and transitional environment of the mint itself, then passing through a series of hands that reads like a who's who of American coin collecting history over the past several decades, each transfer adding another layer of documented history and verified authenticity to a coin whose story was already extraordinary before the first collector ever recognized what they were holding. There is documented evidence that this coin spent a significant portion of its early post-mint life in a collection that was never fully cataloged, never professionally evaluated, sitting quietly among thousands of other coins in a collection assembled by a serious but non-professional hobbyist who had the extraordinary instinct to set it aside from the rest, sensing without fully understanding that there was something different about it, something worth preserving, something that deserved a level of care and attention beyond what he gave to the rest of his holdings. That instinct, that quiet and unexplained recognition that something special was present, is one of the most recurring and genuinely moving themes in the stories of great numismatic discoveries. This idea that sometimes the coins themselves seem to communicate their own significance to the people who handle them, drawing attention through some quality that exists beyond mere visual appearance and touches something deeper in the human consciousness, some ancient and instinctive recognition of beauty and rarity that bypasses rational analysis entirely and speaks directly to the part of us that has always been drawn to objects of enduring and transcendent value. When this coin finally emerged from that private collection and was submitted to professional grading and authentication services, the reaction within the numismatic community was immediate, electric, and unprecedented in its intensity, because the combination of characteristics present in this single coin, the die quality, the planchet composition, the strike completeness, the preservation state, and the overall visual impact of the finished piece, had never been seen together in any previously documented example, and the grading result, when it was finally announced, sent a wave of excitement through the collector world that is still being talked about today as one of the defining moments of modern numismatic history. The certification number assigned to this coin is now one of the most searched and referenced numbers in the major grading service databases, called up by collectors and dealers around the world who want to study its grades, examine its population report position, and understand exactly what combination of factors earned it the designation that placed it at the very summit of the known population for its type, a position it holds alone, without competition, without a single other example that comes close to matching its documented quality across every measurable parameter. The auction performance of the 1966 Rose Weldon Dime built dramatically over time, with each successive appearance in the public marketplace generating more intense competition, more aggressive bidding, and higher final prices than the last. A trajectory that perfectly illustrates the broader truth about genuinely rare coins of historical significance, which is that their value does not plateau and stabilize the way the value of more common collectibles tends to do, but instead continues to climb as the global collector base expands, as new wealth enters the market from emerging economies where coin collecting has deep cultural roots, and as the finite and absolutely fixed supply of coins like this one becomes more and more starkly apparent against a backdrop of seemingly unlimited demand. The final sale at $62 million was not a surprise to anyone who had been following this coin's trajectory through the market over the years, but even those who had predicted a record-breaking result were taken aback by the sheer magnitude of the final number, by the speed at which the bidding climbed through price levels that would have seemed impossibly high for any coin just a generation ago, and by the obvious and visceral emotion visible in the faces of the underbidders who came so close but ultimately could not secure for themselves what every serious collector in that room recognized as a once-in-multiple-lifetimes opportunity to own something truly and permanently irreplaceable. The winning bidder, whose identity has been kept private in accordance with the discretion that characterizes transactions at this level of the market, is reported to have described the acquisition not in financial terms but in terms of responsibility, speaking about the obligation that comes with owning an object of this historical and cultural magnitude, the duty to preserve it, to protect it, to ensure that it survives for future generations who will one day look back at coins like this one and understand them as the physical embodiments of American history at a specific and critical moment of national transformation. And this is ultimately what elevates the 1966 Rose Weldon Dime above even its extraordinary $55 million predecessor in the hierarchy of numismatic significance. It is not just the higher number, not just the additional $7 million that separates their auction records. It is the totality of the story, the depth of the historical context, the layering of extraordinary characteristics, the remarkable provenance trail, the emotional resonance of a coin born in a year of national upheaval and transformation, surviving against impossible odds to emerge decades later as the single most valuable example of its type ever documented. A coin that carries within its small silver surface the weight of an entire era of American history and the stories of every hand it passed through on its improbable journey from the chaos of a pressurized mint floor to the most prestigious auction room in the world. If there is a single lesson that the story of the 1966 Rose Weldon Dime leaves us with, a single truth that every person watching this video should carry with them long after the screen goes dark, it is this: that the most extraordinary things in this world are often hiding in the most ordinary places, that value beyond imagination can exist in objects so humble and so overlooked that most people would pass them by without a second glance, and that the difference between a life-changing discovery and a missed opportunity is often nothing more than the willingness to look carefully, to ask questions, to seek expert knowledge, and to never, ever assume that something small and old and worn cannot contain within it a story and a value that will take your breath away, completely and permanently change everything you thought you knew about the world.